Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. It's so easy to say. All right, let's call 2022 what it is. Component shortages, distribution issues, and overall higher manufacturing costs. Sony's put together a heck of a phone, and to do that, things are getting a little spendy. Sony sent over the new Mark IV. This is an early unit. This is a prototype for me to test drive and share some thoughts. I'm not going to be digging into this like full review style because this is early software and not complete hardware, but I think I've got a pretty good idea of what Sony's aiming for. Using this phone for a bit, it kind of reinforces my frustration with leaks and rumors. Leading up to this launch, we saw numerous headlines about supposed improvements and huge upgrades, and most of them were wrong, which unfortunately colors this phone in a way that some people might find disappointing. I wanted more specs that some random blog leaked, and this phone is different than that. Tech fans decide that they want certain features, and everyone complains that products should always somehow magically cost less. But when we look at premium tier phones, I often don't find there's an issue with price if we're being honest about who should really be using premium tier phones. Now, either you're looking to flex that you spent a lot of money, or you're buying a phone for a purpose. I kind of like Sony's style on both counts, and the Mark IV gets a positive overall recommendation from me, acknowledging that this is a specific kind of pro phone. There's nothing average consumer about this phone. Numerous subtle upgrades are going to be appreciated. We maintain the highest resolution OLED available on any phone with support for fast refresh. And the Mark IV is another step brighter than the Mark III. Where my old Xperia 1 Mark II can be really difficult to read in direct sun, the Mark IV is a substantial upgrade. Lots of little bits of polish just all around. The speakers are a little fuller and a little louder. I've definitely played with some louder gaming phones recently, but I appreciate that Sony always seems to focus on lower distortion playback and prioritizing sort of an arm's length distance for media and gaming. The battery gets a bit of a bump, a little more than 10% larger over the 1 Mark III, without radically changing the overall design or build. Sony's gotten really good at packing larger batteries into this sleek frame. And I personally like how long Sony has held on to this form factor. Tall, skinny, all the buttons on one side of the phone. There's an obvious influence from the Alpha team, and I think it works really well for the photography focus on this device. Hard, flat edges, a great power button fingerprint sensor, and the excellent camera shutter. It's a phone that's beautifully built to be held and used like an action camera. And it's a Sony, and I just said camera, and that deserves a good chunk of the attention and focus. There are 3 camera sensors on the back, and none of them resemble what other blogs were trying to leak or any of the rumors. So a bunch of people are going to complain about some big resolution number and miss the point of what can make a camera better, what can make a phone camera better. But it should have had more megapixels. But of course, we techies who have taste, we know a little bit better than that. So here's the real deal. I mean, here's my truth. I've had phenomenal experiences with phones that have larger main camera sensors. Even in Sony land with the recent Pro I, that camera sensor rocked my socks. I too was hoping to see larger slabs of sensors after using the Pro I. And reading the spec sheet, I was disappointed. Sony's sticking with a 1/1.7 inch main sensor when a few other competitors are climbing to bigger slabs of sensor. However, there are other very important ways to make a phone camera better. As Sony has done something kind of incredible for the 3rd time on one of their phones. Actual mechanical moving optics. The Pro I, of course, had that great variable aperture. The Xperia 1 Mark III had a 2-stage zoom lens on the telephoto. Now, for the Mark IV, we get a true fluid variable zoom on the telephoto. It's a smooth, continuous optical zoom from 85 millimeters to 125 millimeters. A lot of the rumors on this phone were pointing to additional camera sensors to make up medium and longer telephoto options. But we don't need two separate sensors on the back like on a Note 22. This one lens accomplishes kind of the same thing. But to do that, we've got to have moving parts, and any kind of moving parts inside a phone is going to increase engineering costs. I mean, being able to change telephoto focal lengths on the fly without having to switch between sensors is a good add. There's now one continuous transition possible from the ultra wide to the far end of the telephoto. Each sensor can use some digital zoom until it hits the focal length of the next sensor, and then the telephoto is pure optical until 125, and then it can crop in digitally for a little extra reach. So if we fire up Video Pro on this phone, shoot in 4K 30, you can travel the entire zoom range across all three sensors pretty seamlessly. There are still many phones coming out today that can't even shoot 4K video from the telephoto sensor. Instead, they'll crop in from the main sensor for a 2 to 4 times zoom. And on top of that, Sony also delivered something truly unique for 3 individual sensors. All 3 can clear data extremely fast. How fast? All 3 of these things are capable of shooting 4K video at 120 frames per second. Some phones can't shoot 4K from the telephoto at all. Some phones are gonna shoot an actual lower resolution and then upscale the image, and many can't shoot 4K 60. And here's the Mark IV matching high-speed 4K across all 3. 4K 120 is a ton of fun to work with. I haven't personally been much sold on 8K video from phones, but 4K at higher frame rates is a game changer. The footage is saved at real-world speed, and you can stretch that to 1/4, maybe even 1/5 slow motion if you're finishing your video off at 24 frames per second. Amazing clarity, great detail, and from all 3 sensors. I mean, it's really a shame this doesn't get more attention. The only other company including 4K 120 on any of their cameras is OnePlus. And between OnePlus and Sony, it's a video feature I've loved playing with. On a recent road trip, following Lex around, shooting some videos of her at school, it's an immediate way to turn kind of a regular family moment into something a little bolder, 1/4 speed slow motion with amazing clarity. Throw some good music on it, and you've got an incredible family moment that you can share with your loved ones. The Sony cameras were already incredibly fast, spooky good eye-tracking autofocus, fast still photography burst rates. Now, matching all 3 sensors for high resolution and fast frame rate is just absolutely stunning. I think it's fair to point out other phones and list some different pros and cons. There are going to be some phones that I really like, which are better in very low light situations. They have night modes that can turn day into night, but there's no phone anywhere near as complete for the fast stuff. If a phone with a bigger main sensor is like shooting on a medium format camera, this Sony is more like a sports or action camera. It's the absolute fastest overall platform, from taking the phone out of a pocket to capturing an image. Now we also get to add the fastest frame rates at the highest resolution to all 3 sensors, and with a mechanical zoom on the telephoto. There's this obvious focus on photography, video production, vlogging, streaming. So it's just kind of refreshing that we aren't playing games with prices and features. We know prices are climbing across the industry, and Sony is making one version of their one phone. Sony treats their phone division a bit like a boutique manufacturer. These are made in smaller batches to fulfill demand and pre-orders. Sony isn't playing with multiple versions or storage configurations. It's a heavy-hitting camera phone, so it just comes with 512 gig of storage. And even for that huge lump of storage, you don't lose out on upgradable storage, and you can still pop in a memory card without having to use a pin tool to get to your SIM card memory card tray. Even for packing on all the GBs, Sony still assumes that people out there who take this stuff seriously might need to swap storage on the fly, because that's what pros do. Which is funny, because Sony doesn't even call this phone a Pro, and it's pretty pro. Plus the headphone jack. You should know by now how I feel about those, and this is the last premium tier phone, which isn't a gaming phone, to still include a way to connect audio equipment. Now, of course, headphones for listening or gaming, but also microphones for recording. And that's handy on a phone that can also be used as an external monitor for another camera. You can turn this phone into the brain and modem of a nicer or production grade camera to be able to live stream in much higher quality. So you might need the data port for video or for power, so you really don't want to tie up this USB-C just to connect some audio. And that, of course, brings us to performance. There's certainly been a little controversy this year with premium tier phones. I find it's instructive to describe a little of what's going on, and then users can make decisions on what they really need. Now, some phones are managing the performance a bit more, and some phones are letting the SoC run warmer. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 can be a tricky beast to tame. Now, Sony is working this a little more like Motorola for apps and games. Of course, we should expect some thermal throttling when you're running this thing hard, but the phone isn't putting an artificial cap on performance before the thermal throttling occurs. It's up to the user if you're going to play at 60 frames per second or push to higher frame rates. You do get to choose, but you might end up with a warmer phone. That control matters. This is Sony, and on top of camera tech, they take gaming a lot more seriously than many other mainstream players too. On top of the 120 Hz refresh, we also get black frame insertion for sharper details and better clarity. The phone is actually cycling 240 Hz with frames inserted. And so we also get touch and response controls, and those are all for folks who like to play their games a little twitchier. And of course, we always have to shout out the excellent power management features, specifically HS Power Control, where the phone bypasses the battery when it's plugged in. Now, this is to reduce heat. The battery is not charging or discharging significantly. So when you've got it plugged in and you're trying to play a game, you're putting less wear and tear on the battery. You're putting it through fewer charge-discharge cycles. This is a premium feature, which should be on all powerhouse phones, but you're only going to find it on a handful of gaming phones and on the Xperia. Just in terms of real-world performance, I've only gotten thermal warnings twice. Now, when I first got the phone, and again, this is a prototype, I'm trying not to judge it as aggressively as I might a proper retail review unit. First got the phone, fired it up, put in my account, all my details. I had it plugged in while charging. So that combination of setting up accounts, downloading a ton of apps, charging up the battery all at the same time, I did get a thermal warning. This was running way too hot. And it was physically uncomfortable to the touch. Still completed all of those tasks. It was probably completing multiple tasks all at the same time, a little slower than if I had just done one thing at a time. The second thermal warning came after shooting about 5 or 6 minutes of 4K at 120 frames per second in around 90-degree heat here in Southern California. I got a pop-up on the Video Pro app saying, phone is running warm, some features might be disabled, but I was still running clips. I didn't stop to wait for the phone to cool down. I kind of kept going. I only had a little bit further to go. I think I ended up shooting about another 2 to 3 minutes. No additional dropped frames, no other performance issues. The phone kept with me for all of that with continuous warnings, but it didn't shut anything off. I'm encouraged, considering the horsepower and the performance per watt of this SoC, that Sony is doing a reasonably good job of managing this hardware. We just have to keep that in the larger context of what's going on with modern day smartphone SoC design. And new for the Xperia, in addition to recording, there's also better built-in streaming features. Now, one button press will get you online and screen sharing your gameplay. Now, this is kind of funny, it's kind of hilarious, but Sony, as a camera-focused device, and Motorola as a productivity-focused device are becoming some of the best options for not only tweaking gameplay settings, but also sharing your gameplay online. Software additions continue for Xperia this year. And like I said, this is prototype, the software is early. I haven't been able to play with everything that Sony's announcing, but instead of spending time and resources on skinning the phone, the experience is mostly stock, with additional apps and a few UI elements to interact with. SideSense returns. You get fast shortcuts and it's better for one-thumb use. In addition to game streaming, there's also one-button support for live streaming from the front or rear cameras. I wasn't allowed to test that because we're under embargo, but TK and I might host a little Sony live stream soon. There are basic tools to edit individual video clips if you just want to trim something up while you're on the go, but also coming to the retail model of this phone is an audio production app. You're using the mics on the phone or connecting microphones to the headset jack to produce music or podcasts and finish projects all from the phone. I am critically interested in what this might be capable of. The on-phone recording and editing is already huge, but Sony is looking to offer a subscription for cloud-based processing. So you'll have server-side plugins to reduce noise, to reduce echo. You can model different traditional microphones and even cut audio into separate tracks. Say you record a singer with a guitar, you send that up to the cloud, and a server splits that into two distinct pieces of audio while reducing environmental noise. Sony has a huge reputation in production work, and this is totally on brand. Now, turning a phone into a mobile production studio. I already cut audio for podcasts pretty regularly from my phone. Now, once you kind of build a template, you drop it into a timeline, you can render that audio really quickly and get it uploaded back to the web. So much more immediate from your pocket computer than, let me wait until I can sit in front of a laptop or a desktop. Sony building this into an Xperia is such a welcome addition to mobile recording. And honestly, that's about where we should start wrapping up. I mean, this is a first look and I'm dealing with a prototype and just so many thoughts. I have so many feels on this phone. We gotta highlight, this phone is not cheap, but there's also no corner cutting here, not for the phone's guts. I love the Sony vibe on these conversations. There's this almost kind of elitist, I know better than you attitude from Sony. And now that the Xperia team is more integrated with the Alpha team, it can be a pretty blunt conversation. This is what we're doing. This is what we think the phone should be. Even more so in light of all the issues facing the entire tech sector. Sony isn't going to make a product unless they think they can make a profit. And instead of playing games and wasting resources with different options and storage configurations and RAM, they're just putting out their top spec device. A higher price absolutely narrows the recommendation. It makes for a smaller potential market of consumers, but it's so well considered. I have a pretty decent idea of who might be a good fit for a Mark IV, instead of looking at what the Mark IV is really good at and detailing a fair conversation about different pros and cons. We're going to get caught up in the price and how it should have had more megapixels. I'm really happy to see a Mark IV in this current tech climate, and it's been refreshing to see the Sony phone division finding solid footing. This strategy has been working. They've returned the Xperia team to profitability. The batches of phones that they make, they sell out fast. And we still have one brilliant option left with excellent lifestyle features on a premium tier phone. It's the last option left for folks to vote with their wallets. So I will, of course, leave some links down below for more information on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. I'm gonna have a bit more to say about this phone as we get to play with it a bit more. Hopefully I can spend a little bit more time with a retail unit and all of the features enabled. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All of the support has been amazing over the last couple months, especially as some of my videos have been taking a bit longer to come out. I've been under embargo for a bunch of videos like these, and having everybody out there have my back has truly been wonderful. I really can't say thank you enough. For folks that are digging into the links under these videos, checking out my website, SomeGadgetGuy.com, or those who have joined the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe. So I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch, so much on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and I will catch you all on the next review.